Hey everyone, welcome to Watch It Paint. In this video I'm going to be painting some fantasy Zombicide. I say fantasy because I can't remember what set these are from, something Black Plague or Green Horde. One of those ones, the medieval theme. I've just lost track of the Kickstarter exclusives, and that is what these are. Now I've painted all of the game, both Black Plague and Green Horde, completely finished it, so I'm on to the exclusives, and for these I've just left them unpainted in a box, and now I want to get some paint to them. So let's just take this guy for example. The reason I'm talking about it is because I've used contrast paints. Get them done super quick and just give another hero I can use on the battlefield. I am carefully picking which heroes I want to do. So here I've chosen Paul, and that's because the sculpt is highly textured and uses these grungy colours, which I think work exceptionally well with with contrasts. So I'm picking the miniatures well, but you know, this was like 10 minutes of contrast, 10 minutes of detailing, and I've got Paul ready to go. Likewise, I've done the same with Danton here. I have to look at the names because I've not played with them yet. Again, it's pretty textured and dingy colours like most of Black Plague is, but I think the contrasts work really well here. Again, about 10 minutes of painting and then 10 minutes of the detailing with real paint to bring out some exciting bits of the miniature. I've still got to add the blood to both of these. I'll save that for a video in itself. And then for this video, I thought, I have to check his name, William, aka Ned Stark, right? We all know who this guy is. And I thought, again, he's got red, it's a bit bright, but the rest is just these standard dingy colours. And again, the miniature's pretty textured. I'm a bit concerned about the smoothness of some of the cape and such, but we'll see. And either way, it's going to be another miniature done exceptionally quickly. So let's get on to painting him. So for his flesh, I'm going to use Gulliman flesh. That's the Citadel contrast. Yep, everything is going to be contrast until I get to the details. So I'm going to get some of that, but I'm going to water this down. I'm going to make this a lot thinner, and I'm going to do so by applying some contrast medium. Not got enough in the lid there. I want a big dollop, probably adding about 25%, 50% medium, just getting it nice and thin. And I just thought, I want him to be a bit paler, a bit more realistic. It was set in the zombie apocalypse of the 14th century, don't forget, so there was no tanning booths around during that period. So once that's done, mix that in nicely, and I'm just going to apply this to his face. Now if it is too thin, which it could be, because, you know, I didn't use any measuring device to work out exactly how thin I wanted this, I'll just do a second coat. That second coat will add a bit more contrast anyway, but so far it's going on nicely. It's a little bit thinner, but I'm going to build it up. And I'm thinking, looking at this, probably going to add a second coat, but rather 2 coats and an extra, you know, I've got to wait for that to dry, but an extra 2 seconds work and it getting the flesh tone that I want, then just super thick to begin with. Now if time is more important to you, which it often is when you're using contrast paints, or it is for me anyway, then just don't water it down, go for 1 thick coat. But I'll do 2 thin coats I think on William here. So on his face, and that's it. There's no more skin showing. So I'll go and add another coat off camera once this is dry. Instead of just wasting time waiting for that first layer to dry, I'll actually start painting something else, and that can dry while we're doing that. Now for his robes in the centre, with this reddy orange according to the artwork, I am going to use Blood Angel's Red. Now I gave some consideration to Hound Orange. It's much more orangey, and I even thought about mixing the two together, which would probably give a much closer representation of the colour in the artwork. However, I've decided just go for red because I'd like it to be brighter, bolder, pop out a little bit more, and just make it look a little bit more interesting, a bit of a splash of really bright, vibrant colour. So just Blood Angel's Red here, and I'm just going to carefully try and get it on the inside here. Oh, I should mention that I primed this using Wraithbone Primer, Citadel's contrast primer, and I'm using Redgrass Games size 2 brush for this, which might be a little bit big for this particular part, but I'm trying to get it done quickly, and this lets me hold a really nice amount of contrast paint. I'll probably paint that a little bit more carefully off camera when I can see it a little bit closer to my face, so you might notice that jump up in quality shortly after I stop filming. I'm just considering whether I should put some of that orange on the bottom. I can see in the artwork it's just a bit dirtier, a bit dingy, a bit more, I don't know if stained or bleached at the bottom. Certainly thinking about it. I could also maybe try and do it with a rust effect afterwards instead. I don't know. I don't know whether I can be... Oops. I don't know if I can paint while I'm talking. I don't know if I can be bothered. That won't matter too much because I'll be painting that with real paints over the top anyway. That belt buckle that I've just caught there, or belt tip, whatever you would call it. Yeah, I'm not sure I can be bothered. I'm trying to paint this guy quick, but by all means, wet blend a different colour at the bottom like the artwork, or add some dirt afterwards. Don't forget to get under the robe. Adding some realism 3D. You want this to be painted on all sides. It's going to be super difficult with the base right underneath, but not many people look up his skirt, so don't worry too much about getting all the way under. You've got this sneaky little sausage bit down the side to catch as well. Again, I'll just touch this up a little bit closer to my face where I can see it. Now, I did touch up that red off camera. I did downsize to a Red Grass Games 00 to get some of the details, just to let you know. Also did a second coat of his face, probably go to a third later on. And I grabbed the hobby holder to make this easier to hold. Next, I'm going to paint his boots. I'm going to use Wildwood Brown. It's going to be very, very straightforward. Big brush, quick single coat, thick and fast, and that'll be the boots done. Just going to get on the inside there more carefully with my 00 brush off camera, and then just around this side another quick single layer. The next contrast up is Skeleton Horde, and this is going to be for his very light pale leather armor. So he's got a little bit on his knee just here. I'm probably going to add 2 coats to this just because it's so pale, but I do want it to match the artwork, and it looks pretty pale. I've considered Agros Dunes for that, but I think it's just a bit too dark, and I think I'm going to save that for his hair, which is marginally darker than his leather armors. So possibly 2 coats on this. We'll see. It's just that I can't get it on as thick as I want, I don't think, without bleeding into the other areas. But we'll see how I get on. I should mention off camera, I added a 3rd coat to his face, and that's about where I want his skin colour to look now. Now, it did take a long time, 3 coats instead of 1 thick one, but in my opinion, it's a lot smoother. I might have looked out and done it with 1 coat, but in 1 coat it can be a bit risky. Using that contrast medium does give you a lot more control and removes that risk, because some of these contrast paints are just so dark and way too contrasty to begin with. So sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and if you want to be like risk averse, just watering them down is a good way of going about saving yourself some trouble. That's his leather armor done nicely. I'm even going to use contrast for his belts. Normally I'd count this as detail, but he's got a big power belts on. He is making a play here. He's got setting his status up. I'm going to use Gore Grunter. Yeah, Gore Grunter fur, whatever that means. It's a nice brown to match the artwork, and I'm going to downsize for this bit. There's no way I can manage to do this with a big brush. I'm going to downsize to the Red Grass Games 00 and just carefully apply this all over all the bits of the belt I can see. I should mention off camera, I noticed he's got a bit of cloth showing through in his elbow, around his elbow area, his elbow, however you guys phrase it these days. And in the artwork, I can't really tell what colour that is, so I've just matched it to his lingerie underneath. I like red. Again, same reason I chose it instead of maybe an orangey colour. Again, this colour could even have worked for his robes if you'd like him to look a bit dingier, but I want him to be jazzy. So I've made that elbow match the jazz. And that's it, guys. There's the belts done. Let's let that dry. Wow, so we're already down to the second to last colour, or at least contrast colour. We're going to go do some detailing after this. That is Basilicum Grey, and that's for his cloak. Now, I would say this has the biggest chance of going wrong. There's a lot of smooth areas and very deep recesses. You're probably going to find this pooling, so I'm going to try and apply this quite thinly. I've not watered it down because I do want it to be high contrast, but I'm going to try and spread it around, I think, and let the primer and the paint do the work, and hopefully it will just run any excess into the recesses and not be too extreme, but I think this will be the worst bit. That's my guess. I mean, it'll be nice up here around the top where it's got a lot of texture, a lot of ridges. That's going to look sweet, would be my guess. Maybe we should even start at the top and work our way down, shifting the paint downwards. But robes are a risk. Well, big robes like this. A big furry robe would be sweet. A cloak, I mean, not robes as well. But yeah, something like this. It's just got too big, lumpy, smooth. It's like painting a space marine. I don't think the contrast is going to make it look amazing. We'll see though. Have a little faith, baby. I'm just getting my pessimistic views in early. I'll carry on going around and painting this. It's by far the biggest bit. Painting this normally would take so much longer. If it does work, hallelujah, it's going to be a miracle. It's going to be a real time save. And if it doesn't work, it's probably going to be fine for one of about 1 billion heroes I've got. And it's just another painted choice we can play with. It's the last contrast paint time. I'm going to use Agros Dunes, a very pale, leathery brown. That's just to paint on his hair, a little bit darker than the leathers I did, but as I mentioned before, you could use this colour for the leathers. It will look pretty sweet. But here I am mixing it up, and this is the final contrast. It's going to be very easy. I'm going to use the smaller brush to paint this in, although a big brush is probably quite easy because there's not a lot you could accidentally hit. But around his face, I wanted to be careful. In the artwork, he's coming off the hobby holder. The putty's letting me down. It's not the hobby holder, it's putty. Anyway, the artwork, he's got a beard. He's got no beard on the sculpt, so I'm going to have to paint that in by hand if I want it, which I'm not sure I do. We'll see at the end. If his face needs some interest, I'll paint it in. Just the same as Paul, the artwork had beard, but it didn't have one on the miniature, but I painted it in anyway. Actually gave him some stubble. Wow. Anyway, let's let this dry fully, and then I'm going to add some detail. Ooh. Right, guys, I'm just back from a quick 5k run. While I was waiting for this dry, guys, hit like below if you run and paint as well. I'm pretty happy with how this has dried. The contrasts worked pretty well, saved us a whole bunch of time. Base coat more or less completely done, and then I got some shading and highlights for free. The bit that sort of let me down, as I said, the cape's done nicely at the top. Pretty happy with that. Even down the side, it's just where I thought at the back there's some sort of wash marks, especially down the bottom here. Now, I'm going to want to fix that up. I'm either going to highlight it a little bit lighter, so because this is the area I'd probably highlight anyway, or add some dirt at the bottom of his cloak, like I mentioned I might do on this robe here. I'll work that out at the end, but let's continue painting it. We're going to be adding the detail now. For this, I'm going to add some metallics, basically. I think the majority of the detail work on this is going to be metallics. This is going to be Army Painter's Rough Iron, and I'm just going to paint on this knee pad that he's got that looks like it's in a really dark metallic colour down here. I'll be highlighting this with some silver, just because I always think the Rough Iron just doesn't look super metallic. I mean, it does a bit, but it's just, I like my silver, so we'll highlight it up with that and really make this pop out. One detail down, I'm going to carry on with some more metallics. This is Machine Gun Metal, Army Painter's Dark Silver. I'm going to be putting in some of the silver details. Again, it's mostly going to be metallics, I think, but on his belt, he's got a whole bunch of metal. So all of these, what would you call these, like rivets up his belt. Got one here as well. He's got some buckles as well, but I'll probably bring this a little bit closer to my face. One on this belt, one on this belt. I'll get that bit closer to me so I can see what I'm doing. A little bit here. I mean, guys, if you're painting this, you've got the artwork. Follow it along. Add some machine gun metal on these parts. It's going to look awesome. Also got the top of his sheath. It's really weird in the artwork. He's got his sheath hanging down sort of behind him. It's gone in the sculpt. Although I just mentioned his beard was gone, but I've looked really, really close and I can actually see his beard, so I take that back. It's ridiculously hard to paint on, but he has got a beard. Whereas his sword, I mean, I'm sure pretty certain I'm not going to spin it around and see his sheath sticking out. I've checked a few times. I'm also going to be painting on his gloves using this machine gun metal. darker silver, and I'm going to do his sword in Claymore Blade, which is the lighter silver, just to give some contrast between his hands and his weapon. His other glove here to do, and then after this glove I'm going to go around and paint all of studs. That was the word I wanted, not rivets. I would say his belt had some studs on it, and his studded leather armor certainly does. And I'm going to go around and find every single little stud on this and give it a little dab of machine gun metal. So that's all the studs painstakingly painted in now. It was easy. I just needed to get it close. I'm going to paint in the sword now, including the hilt, with Claymore Blade. That's quite handy, isn't it? Could this be a Claymore? Maybe. But either way, it's just a lighter silver to what I painted his gloves, his armoured gloves in with. Give it some differentiation between the sword and his hands, like so. I'm also going to paint in the pommel down here. That looks like shiny silver, and between his hands, the handle. Not much to catch there. And then while I've got this paint out, I'm going to also start highlighting up some of that machine gun metal. So I'm going to get the tip of his belt down here. I'm also going to get the center of the studs on his belt, like so. Catch a little bit on whatever this is dangling down here, a little bit on the edge of his sheath, and then I'm going to wipe most of it off and essentially dry brush his greaves here, his gloves, get his fingers. Like I said, just kind of dry brushing this on, getting some edge highlighting on. Get the top up here as well, like so. Then probably off camera I'll do this, but I'll just go around and get the center of all the studs of his armor as well. But that's a very, very small amount of detail that I need to get a bit closer to my face. It's the never-ending metallic highlights. I'm going to use Army Painter's Bright Gold and just get these, I don't know what you call these, like clasps on his cape. He's got one on each side. Just a little dab of detail there. And that's the end of the metallics. I'm going to use a little splash of Army Painter's Dark Tone just to make some of the details pop back out. So that's along this little chain here, make that stand out a little bit on the end of his belt here, just a splash. And then mainly I was using this, it's for his gloves, sort of his fingers are a little bit invisible, so we'll just add a little bit of this black wash just to make them separate out so you can see the detail there, as well as he's got like this square on the back of his glove just there, and that was getting lost. Same on this hand. So you could do the highlights to the gloves after this, but I was just doing it before and using the wash because I knew it was coming and I wanted to blend in those highlights. Some on the hilts, there's all this sort of, it's all bobbled and you really can't see that until we had this wash, which really pops out the detail again. Put some along the bottom of here. I think I'm going to do nothing to the actual sword. I'm just going to leave the blade one flat colour. It looks nice, it's nice and shiny. Maybe add a little bit of blood for a little bit of interest to it. I think that's, let's get a little bit on his belt buckles. They sort of lost the detail as well once they were silvered, but that should fix that. Yeah, that's looking nicer. There we go, I'll let that dry. And with that, I am completely finished. Now, this paint job took me no time at all. That run in the middle of it took longer than putting paint on this miniature. I am loving the contrast range, especially for this. I was loving it for Hordes, where it doesn't really matter. But Zombicide, there's how many heroes are there? 100. There's as many heroes as there are Hordes. So to some extent, yeah, I'm going to paint my favourites the best I can. But the bulk of the Kickstarter exclusives, I'm just going to slap some contrast on and bring out the details using real paint and take your focus away from that. And I think they look great. I'm just showing you here two of the other ones that I've currently painted. Let me know in the comments below if you would like to see some more painted, especially if you've got one in particular you would like to see, and let me know if you've got one in particular you don't want to see. Either way, leave me a comment, guys. If you're unaware, on Patreon we're currently running a competition for a zombie themed paint job, and there's some prizes and a trophy to win. Check that out on Patreon. The link to that is in the description below. Thank you all ever so much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Do hit that smash. Oh, what am I even talking about?